The Catholic Morning Show.
So wonderful to be with you here, friends. I'm Bo Bonner, your host. Alexia Baker, Aidan Pugh, and Brady Grimm, all here to make sure that the Catholic Morning Show on Iowa Catholic Radio can be sparkling and bright here as you start your week. Thank you for joining us. You are not going to be sad. Let's turn now to our first guest of the day, Dr. John Cuddeback, The Intentional Household, Living as If People Mattered, out by Ignatius Press. Again, folks, we're running around in the modern day, especially this summer, especially July 4th weekend. But if we want that place where we are centered, where we have roots, where we can both work and play together, we're going to have to be intentional about it. And that's what Dr. John Cuddeback is here to talk about. Dr. John, thanks for coming on the Catholic Morning Show.
Thanks so much. Great to be with you, Bo.
So, obviously households being important to so many people, but needing the work to make them a real fixture in our life. What motivated you to think it's time to write a book and share some of this wisdom that you've accumulated over the years?
That is kind of the key question, because in certain ways, these are things that you might say, well, why do we need a book? They should be ordinary, but not our day and age and what St. John Paul II called a culture of death. We have to reckon with the truth that in so many ways our culture is working against us, cutting us off from a traditional wisdom, cutting us off from the ordinary practices that are so central to God's plan for us. So we're going to have to recognize, especially the young people, but who by God's grace want something. They know they want something really good. They're looking for something better, maybe different than they grew up with. They're recognizing it's going to have to look a little different than the last generation. But they're lacking examples. They're lacking the principles. The whole point of the book is now more than ever, we're going to have to lean into this and have a very clear conception of what God's plan for daily life in the household is. So we need some clear principles. We need some examples of how we're going to do that in today's very challenging context.
Well, if you're a listener out there and you're thinking, this sounds familiar, this seems to ring something true, when you argue that modern society has dismantled this, at least gradually over time, the household as the center of daily life, how did we get here? To your mind, what is it that started this fact?
That's a great question. In a sense, everything always goes back to how we relate to God. So the ultimate root is we've been rejecting God's plan in an increasingly explicit way, and that has more and more over the last several hundred years kind of gone down to the roots of things, and it finally got to where we have dismantled things kind of right at the root. But I'd say more specifically, we have prioritized things we shouldn't have. We have put first a kind of material success, pleasure, honors, things that have always been tempting, but we've rejected Christianity fundamentally, made a different choice option of what we're going to put first, and those skewed values, that is what has now finally undermined the household, because the subtitle, Living as If People Matter. This is a real thing. People are primary in God's plan. It's always about people and their flourishing, and that's not what we actually, as a society, are prioritizing. So the household doesn't look important to us. If we put people and their real flourishing first, then household will be a priority. If we don't, it's not. And that's what we see all around us.
We're speaking with the philosopher Dr. John Cuddeback about his new book, The Intentional Household, out by Ignatius Press. When people feel that their families are fragmented or overextended or just maybe disconnected, what would you say is the main driver for such a crisis?
I think it's the loss of the ordinary, and this is why it has snuck up on us. But if we look around honestly and have a little bit of an historical perspective, we'll realize that what was ordinary, sitting around the fire, sitting on the porch, working together with our hands, singing at the piano, going for a walk together as a family, a host of rich activities. Now, if you do them, to people it sounds like a fairy tale, but it used to be ordinary, and we need to find ways to make these kinds of things ordinary again. It's not about turning back the clock. It's about figuring out how to have rich work and leisure. These are the two big categories. That's precisely what's been removed. So it's going to be building those kind of things in. Baby steps, starting small, choosing a few things we're going to focus on. How we have our meals is a huge, great place to start.
The book is The Intentional Household, out by Ignatius Press. You know, Dr. John Cuddeback, if people are out there listening and they go, you know, it's hard to build enduring relationships in our world. You know, maybe not only in our home, but you think in the workplace, in community, trying to be that friend or to be that confidant or just have camaraderie with people has gotten more and more difficult. Why would that be the case? Why is that a common experience for people today?
I think the reason it's such a common experience is because we have enshrined it in our common practices. The technologies that we use, our practices of how we do our professions, it shows up in all the different main areas of culture. And again, very complicated, kind of sad story of how we got here, but God's power, our God is always greater. These are the times that God called us to live in. And so it's, in a sense, it's very exciting. But we have to begin by being realistic, not negative, not moaning and complaining, but realistic about the challenge that we have there, and saying, yeah, it is going to be challenging, it's going to take intentionality, but this is God's plan for us. It's what our children need. It's what the elderly need. It's what we need. It's what we all need. In a sense, it's very simple, but it's an arduous good. It's going to take courage and beginning with simple steps to make home have the reconnectedness. I'm right with you. It's a matter of there's so many disconnections. Home is the natural place of connection. That's where we need to begin there to tie the threads together again, according to God's plan.
In your book, The Intentional Household, that we're talking about today, you describe the home as the school of responsibility. When people hear that out on the airwaves, what do you mean, and what's the way that helps us answer some of these difficulties you've brought up?
Well, here's the thing. I think something that we're all noticing is, oh my goodness, where's the sense of responsibility gone? Even in good families, people don't have a sense of kind of purpose, direction. What are we working for? And I argue early on in the book that this comes back to we aren't living God's plan in its richness, in its fullness of taking responsibility for one another. Most of all begins with the spouses, the parents, who have to prioritize in a radical way. I especially call out to the dads. I know how hard it is. I have a profession that takes me away from home, too. Our children desperately need us. As a college professor, I see that every day of my life, the disconnection between children and their parents. So we need to go back and we need to take responsibility in simple, concrete ways. It has to be enacted in ways that we're with our spouse, our children, in the home, because that's where life begins. That's where the fundamental formation is, and we're constantly being pulled away from that, encouraged to ignore it. We're not praised for what we do there. We're going to have to make that decision ourselves to really lean into it.
We're speaking with Dr. John Cuddeback about his new book, The Intentional Household, out by Ignatius Press. And you mentioned this idea of the multigenerational house. And I think an array of concerns you have in your book can really be about integrating what seems to be different concerns for different groups. So you bring up elderly relatives. You talk about parents and how they relate to kids. You even talk about how technology, for instance, plays a role in this. What is it about the different generations and how you would hope that families take a new approach to those questions when considering an intentional household?
Part of it, Bo, is again putting first things first, having the humility and docility to see what is God's plan. We learn so much about what the household is by looking to the vulnerable, by looking to the weak. This is the way the design is. It's household is a place for life to begin. It's a natural place for life to end. And we, again, as a society, we're rejecting that. We're setting our older people aside. And look, we have to live in the time in which we are. It might be the case that someone has to be in a nursing home. If that's the case, that's the case. Not necessarily this is all about we have to have them living in the home with us. But are we being intentional about saying, how are we following God's plan that the elderly bring their wisdom, bring their experience, and bring their needs to our home? And have that be central to who we are and the formation of us as adults and of young people. We need to serve them. That's clearly part of God's plan. And so at least to be alert to this. The first step is always to realize, whoa, there's a great part of God's plan we haven't been seeing. There's great hope if we just recognize that, and according to each of our own situations, we'll say, how can we integrate them? Maybe it's they're moving back in. How are we going to get them more deeply involved?
Well, the book is The Intentional Household, Living as If People Matter, out by Ignatius Press. Before we let you go, if there's one practical thing, a listener who feels motivated to take your argument seriously, what's a practical thing they can do today? And what's one just foundational thing that you would hope people would take away if they get a chance to read your book?
It's in the encouragement we can do this, but there's something big we're going to have to recognize we haven't been doing. So let's start each day in how we eat together. And let's prioritize meals, because meals bring together good work and simply being in the presence, the bodily presence, where we're going to turn off our technology for the sake of that meal, and we're going to linger, and we're going to show people their place in life. This is a step within all of our reach. Wherever we are, step things up a little bit, and it's going to make a huge, lasting difference.
Well, we've been speaking with Dr. John Cuddeback. He's professor of philosophy at Christendom College since 1997. The book is The Intentional Household, Living as If People Matter, out by Ignatius Press, everywhere Ignatius Press books are sold. Dr. John Cuddeback, thank you for coming on the Catholic Morning Show.
Listen to the Catholic Morning Show weekdays at 7 a.m. Central on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network, iowacatholicradio.com, or the Iowa Catholic Radio app.